If you didn't already know, I make add-ons for the Bedrock Edition of Minecraft, and two of my most popular add-ons are mob heads and mini blocks, which you can use in your vanilla game. They work on the latest release of Minecraft, and they are in a stable release, which means they don't require the beta version or experimental gameplay features, which we'll explain a little more about later. However, because of that, there are some problems with these packs. Problem number one, as people like to keep telling me, is that you cannot place them on an armor stand and you cannot put them on your head. But I did make it so you can sit on them because we lost that functionality. I thought I'd add in something a little bit more fun. Now that goes for both the mob heads and the mini blocks, and the reason we can't put them on our heads is because they're just entities. These are actually spawn eggs, and they're entities. They don't fit on your heads, they're not armor, because right now we can't actually add in official custom armor or custom blocks into the game. And because these entities are generated from spawn eggs, that means we can put them on a mob spawner we might find in our vanilla survival world and generate more of these things, which, yeah, is a bit cheaty and not ideal. Not only that, we also have a couple of bugs with how Bedrock deals with entities. These entities have no collisions and no gravity, which means they act very strangely. If you ping them up in the air, they will never ever come back down again, and if you pour water on them, they will eventually sink when they get to the edge of the water, and they'll go through the block and they'll never ever come back up or stop unless you log out the world. So I've had to put into a pack a system to make them despawn when they hit world height or when they go below bedrock, so you don't have loads of entities that you can't find cluttering up your world and causing lag. And lag is a problem when it comes to entities. If you can see the very bottom left corner of my screen, you will see there is a frames per second counter that's currently reading around about 91 frames per second. That is how many frames per second I'm getting with all of these entities lying about in the world in close proximity to each other. If I then kill all of those entities and get rid of the items, you'll see that frames per second number jumps up to around about 230 frames per second, which is a substantial increase once we got rid of the entities. So entities all round are not perfect, but there are some amazing things we can do with them because they are entities. Because of the way entities work and what access we have to manipulate them within add-ons, we can do an awful lot of things with entities that we just couldn't do with custom blocks or custom armor. You can see here that I'm moving these items around with these different dies because entities are ridiculously flexible in terms of what you can do with them. Which means you can do some pretty amazing things with them, like putting them inside each other and changing the side and pushing them close together to create amazing looking things. Like this ridiculous little armchair and coffee table with a coffee mug on top that you can actually sit on. It's ridiculous what you can do with these things as entities. That chair and table was made by Liara on the Truly Bedrock SMP. And entities are sadly what we're stuck with unless we're prepared to turn on these experimental features, which are basically features of Minecraft that are not quite ready for stable release yet, so you can't use them on realms and you can't use them on servers. You can only use them on your single player worlds. And I have a single player world here where I've been fiddling with them. In this world here, I've been experimenting with some of those new tools that exist behind those experimental switches, which allow us to solve a lot of the problems that we have with our entities. You can see in front of me here we have some chests, but these are not entities, believe it or not. These are actual blocks, which means we can use tools to mine them rather than clicking on them, and it means that we can place them and basically walk on them and do things with them. Oh yeah, and we can put them on our heads, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The problem with them being blocks is that the blocks at the moment, or custom blocks that are hiding behind the experimental features, are extremely limited in how you can interact with them. You can't use different items on them to do different things, like we can with the dies with the entities, but we can interact with them with our hands, and I've managed to make it so we can spin these ones round. But that's all we can do. We can't move them up and down, we can't move them back side to side, we can't change how big they are, but if we stand on them, we can change the texture. So there's not much we can do in terms of moving them about, which means that we can't do things like this, which are actually entities. So here I've got entities, like we had before, and here I've got blocks. So the chest is a block, that is an entity. I can walk straight through that. It doesn't do anything, but I can walk on top of that and I can actually stand on it. I can't sit on that, but I can sit on that. And in this world, I can put both of those things on my head. So if I break that chest there and I click it, you will see that is now on my head. I have a chest on my head, and if I get this entity here and I take the chest off my head and I click that, you'll see I can put the entity on my head as well. That is because in experimental gameplay features, we're not actually putting these blocks on our head. The blocks you see on the floor are not skulls, they're not fake skulls. We are using custom items, which is another thing hidden behind experimental features, and those items we can create as armor. So what the game thinks is happening here is that we have this piece of armor that we can put on our head, but we can also place it in the world and it becomes a block. Or, depending on how we set the item up, when we place it in the world, it becomes an entity. So we're now at a crossroads with where we go in the future, because I don't know what direction to go in. I interrupt this video to tell you that I am working on another add-on that is hidden behind experimental features, and this one is all to do with hats. I've created a hat mod, which yes, does exist for Java Edition, again, doesn't exist for Bedrock Edition, and I need your help designing and creating different hats. And you make these using the block bench tool. They are just Minecraft entity models with texture files, and I need as many as possible in order to make this pack great and amazing. Now this pack is not going to be made available publicly until the custom items feature is out of experimental mode, where basically when we can use those in game, like on servers and realms. But as soon as it is, this thing will be available for download, and I really hope you guys like it. I'm having a great time putting it together, but making all of these models and textures on my own is slow going, so I really need your help. If you help me do that, if you want to submit a model and a texture, come to my Discord, drop it in there with your username, and I'll make sure that your name goes into the pack file so that people know it is from you. I will credit anybody that helps with this add-on. Anyway, enough of this nonsense, back to what I was talking about a second ago. So we're now at a crossroads with where we go in the future, because I don't know what direction to go in. Before we start making our decisions though, let's just look at a couple more things. We've already seen how we can manipulate the entities with different dies and things like that, and we've seen how we can spin the chests round like this. But one other thing we can do, if we was to use blocks in the future rather than entities, is turn them into light sources. You can see here I have a sea lantern. If I set it to midnight, you can see that sea lantern there, which is a mini block, actually emits light. If I break it, no light. This is a proper sea lantern, as you can see. Get rid of that and put this mini block sea lantern down, and we can get them to emit light. So we could have, oh yeah, and this one goes on my head as well. This is a bit of a problem, is when you go to place these, because it's a bit of armor and placeable, it means that when I put it on the floor, it places it and puts it on my head at the same time, which is kind of weird. It's not ideal. But yeah, basically we can use these blocks as light sources as well if we wanted to. And because blocks are not laggy at all, they don't affect our frames per second. And let's do a quick test. Currently we're getting 350 frames per second in this world. If I drop in roughly 1,000 mini blocks, you'll see that my frames per second, well, it's actually gone up because I'm looking at the sky, but it really hasn't changed at all. It hasn't been affected by the fact that there are 1,000 mini blocks in this world, each one of which I can rotate and do what I want with. Now let's see what happens if we add 1,000 entities into this world. And here we go, we are just about at 1,000 entities. There we go, I've flicked the lever and you can see we are down to 14 frames per second. So that is a massive difference with entities and mini blocks. So right now, mini blocks are looking like the best way forward. The thing is though, even though it looks like these blocks are quite clearly a better solution in terms of lag and stuff like that going forward, I really don't know what the best route forward is. On one hand, we've got blocks which are lag free, but very, very limited in terms of how we can adjust them and do things with them. And on the other hand, we've got entities which are very laggy, but they can do so many different things. Don't forget, after these come out of experimental mode, we'll be able to put both types on our head, both the blocks or the entities, because that is actually handled by these items, which are no longer spawn eggs. So if we go down the entities route, we're not going to have issues with spawn eggs, we're not going to have issues not putting it on our head. However, we still will have those sorts of issues to deal with, them flying off into the sky and them sinking into the ground. So I guess at this point, I'm really asking you what you think, because you're going to be the people that are using these add-ons, potentially. You're the ones that are going to be downloading them. Would you rather have a really limited set of mini blocks that don't cause any lags and all you can do is spin them round? Or would you rather have the flexibility and the creativity behind the entities? I really don't mind which route we go down, and we could go down both, but I think that would get very complicated. So we need to make a decision. Now I am going to be working on this pack whilst these things are still behind experimental toggles, but I probably won't release it until those features are actually in the stable release so people can use them on realms and servers. And my reasoning for that is because basically I get a lot of people very confused why they can't use the add-ons on servers and realms, and I have to go down the rabbit hole of explaining what experimental features are, and it's very confusing, it's very time consuming, and it's very frustrating for people when they download something, they think it's going to work, and then they realise it's not going to work. So I will probably release it for download once these things are stable, which might be in a month, it might be in 6 months. I have no idea when these features are going to be put out into stable release. Now I know I've waffled on a bit, hopefully I've done my best to explain the situation and how this all works, and hopefully you can now help me decide, do we go down the mini block route, or do we continue with mini entities but just be happy that we can now put them on our heads and on armor stands? You let me know, please let me know down in the comments. I'll do a poll on my Discord as well, and we'll see how we got on. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do leave a like. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!